just another self-observation. So I recall when in my more schizophrenic states thinking that there was a Jewish conspiracy. And if I kept their secrets out of loyalty, I would be rewarded. Very interesting thing because it actually went from Christianity, and I went from atheism into Christianity into a little bit of Freemasonry through Mormonism, which is like Alcoholic Anonymous Freemasonry, into into Judaism, just pursuing the source, the data source of the book, uh, which Freemasonry is a little interesting in itself, but stay on topic. Um, so as a perfect example of that, right? When I see these observations, like, oh, these Israelis who are running Citizen Cafe, these Jews, they're weaponizing their classes to manipulate and mold the minds of their students for things that technically have nothing to do with learning Hebrew. They're slipping other things in there. And there's a neuroscience to it. There's brain scans that show it part of the brains are active when you're speaking versus when you're listening, etc. And my university does the same thing. I've actually self-observed the effects of what they're doing. It's very deliberate, it's very intelligent, it's a very sophisticated method of manipulation. So therefore, oh, if I keep it secret, if I don't say what the Jews are doing, the Jews will reward that behavior. This has happened a lot in my life. Wait a minute. They didn't reward my behavior. They didn't let me come back to a second term. That's weird. And so my mind would create, oh, yeah, no, this is actually part of the plan. No, 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 yeah, my reward will be in heaven, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? I no longer think that way. Thank Hashem for mental stability, specifically due to the elimination of marijuana. Oh, yeah, and that's another thing. So with my family, I applied the scientific method to falsify my assertion, my conclusion of the analysis that they were destructive and therefore contributing factors to maladaptive thoughts and behavior. With the removal of them from my life, I'm in university with a very good GPA. I was learning Hebrew. I guess now it's violin. It's actually a lot cheaper every month, like insanely cheaper. It's one of the reasons I was learning Hebrew, aside from just wanting to read the original Old Testament in its Hebrew, which is completely different than English, but also different from the original ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. Right, learning modern Hebrew would give me and help me like a step towards ancient Hebrew. It would give me more familiarity, better understanding. It would give me an edge. It was like a step to take. But another aspect was neuro rehabilitation because society is so corrupt. I, from Vashon to New Mexico, never got a brain scan, let alone diagnosis and treatment for my schizophrenia, despite the fact that 70,000 volts went through me and I was clearly displaying symptoms consistent with a traumatic brain injury. Finally got one in 2021. They said the scarring is still there, but it's more or less functional. And I attribute that to my self applied neurorehabilitation because society is so fucked up, they would just let me die and not give a shit. Wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire. Uh, so violin is just like learning a second language is a very effective method of neurological rehabilitation. Like lifting weights with the mind. So and this course is only like $75 a month instead of $1,200 every 3 months. So yeah. And I've had a $650 violin with a $180 carbon bow that I bought years ago, specifically because I love violin, of course, and I want to play it, but also as a neurorehabilitative method. And it's been neglected. I've literally placed my relationship with God and converting to Judaism, etc., as a higher priority than learning the violin. So it's just been sitting collecting dust for over a year now. But I don't think this conversion to Judaism. This is a thing that's happened a lot. My justification for that was, oh, they're supposed to turn people away. They're supposed to discourage conversion. They're supposed to make it difficult. Yeah, Citizen Cafe isn't a conversion to Judaism program. So I think a big part of that is Jews are very sensitive because they're very liberal. On average, I know there's conservative and right wing Jews, but on average, Jews are largely more secularist, more liberal, more leftist. And so my experience with leftists is conservatives will explain it in the term if it wasn't for double standards, the left would have no standards at all. But a more accurate, sophisticated, and you know, better understanding of this dynamic of behavior, this behavioral dynamic, is their morality is circumstantial based on profit cost, model. So their morality applies only when it benefits them and is absent when it's cost. This is an effective business model. This is the type of approach it requires to win in competitive fields, etc. And the only way to gain this perspective is through emotional detachment that removes bias. Accuracy and analysis, yeah, objectivity. Emotional detachment is essential to accuracy and analysis through objectivity. And so this is not a moral condemnation on Jews or Citizen Cafe or anything, just an accurate analysis. Nor is it on my family. I don't think they can help it. I think there's a gray area between like what was deliberate and what wasn't. And that's a fun thing for me because there are a lot of white supremacists who blame everything on the Jews. And there are a lot of liberals who blame everything on whites. And there's a lot of blacks and a lot of Mexicans who blame everything on whites and Jews like Kanye West, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is a hilarious self insult that he's dealing upon himself because he's saying if it wasn't for Jews, he would still be in the Serengeti, you know, chucking spears and bone through the nose, plate in the lip, life expectancy of maybe 20, maybe 30 years old if he's very lucky. Anyway, um, so whew, my favorite way to frame it, because I'm now applying psychology in these, counter propaganda campaigns against the white supremacy, etc., is the white supremacists say it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews. It's the Jews behind the black on white violence. And so when I analyze things objectively, when I remove any bias and perception that I can, we're all human, we all have inherent bias. Um, Both Darrell Brooks and Robert Bowers, who killed 11 Jews in the synagogue in, I think it was Philadelphia, had two causal components to identify marijuana and social media. These things are mentioned in the FBI Assailant Mindset Report of 2016. So it's insane to know that I've been posting this stuff on the internet, been called a liar. No, it turns out I was right this whole time. So the question that I framed to the white supremacists is, all right, so does this mean if Darrell Brooks' legal defense was the Jews made me do it, the Jews pushing weed, pushing, anti-white incitement to violence through their ownership of the media, therefore I am not accountable for murdering all these white Christians at a Christmas parade in Waukesha, the Jews made me do it. Will the white supremacists say, okay, you're forgiven? Free pass, clean slate. I doubt it. But to apply this even more effectively, I also ask if you come home and your wife, who's white just like you, is cheating with the black, do you blame the wife, the black, both the wife and the black, or do you blame the Jews? Do you shake your fist at the television? Damn Jews with their race mixing advertisements and socially engineered moral decline through Hollywood, their anti monogamous culture through their ownership of the rap industry and the Hollywood industry, etc. Right? So where does accountability as a boundary line, begin and where does it end? Whew. And this is a very ancient thing. Is it the alcohol salesman's fault for creating the alcohol and disseminating it? Or is it the customer's fault for purchasing it? This is a legal thing with bartenders who are being charged for over serving customers who end up in DUIs, right? Where does accountability end and where does it begin? In regards to cannabis, the reason the opiate crisis didn't affect me is as the violin and other brain exercises started becoming effective, and I began to isolate and identify contributing factors to maladaptive thoughts and behavior like alcohol, drugs, etc., opiate users, the psychoactive chemical they're introducing to their bloodstream is contained solely to the user's bloodstream. There's no involuntary exposure because they're, intravenous injections or swallowing the oxycontin pills, etc. The chemicals they consume weren't getting in my system. With marijuana, a secondhand exposure is forced drugging, secondhand smoke. The combustion method of chemical extraction does not contain the chemical solely to the user's bloodstream, nor is it medicinal. Forced drugging is involuntary intoxication. This is a completely different thing because I am not getting high by choice. I'm being forced into schizophrenic episodes against my will and without my consent by having marijuana forced into my bloodstream against my will and without my consent. So where is the government in all this? Oh, right. They're on the side of the people forcing drugs on the masses against our will and without our consent. Obviously, I don't speak for everybody, but everyone who agrees with me on that topic, at least. And guess what? I don't believe the anti Semites that the Jews are controlling the government to do this, specifically because I've seen these same anti Semites promote marijuana, saying it's a white man's drug. So, for those anti Semites watching, I just want you to know that I know that you're full of shit.